Let's start with that group. Notre Dame. Notre Dame was my next team, and I had to draw the line somewhere, and I had to draw it above Notre Dame. And the reason is that as positively as I feel about Notre Dame coming out of the game against Ohio State, and I really do, I was impressed with them. I think that they have a quarterback that is a real quarterback now. It takes them. Their ceiling is so much higher than it has been over the last few years. They're talented, and yet they had the home field advantage. They had the momentum on their side in the second half. They had it right there for the taking and still got beat. So it's like all of the ghosts for Notre Dame are still there. They still haven't done it. It's kind of they still haven't beaten Ohio State since the 1930s. And while this would have been a huge win for them, they lost at home to Ohio State. And so I had to draw the line somewhere. Like you had a team with a guy making his fourth start. I know technically it's his fifth, but stop it with that. People on social media are like, it's his fifth start. Technically, it was his fifth start. It was his fourth start, folks. His first start came 2 years ago in mop-up duty for C.J. Stroud, who was injured for a week right after the Oregon loss. I get it. McCord started back then. Like, this was his first start. Fourth start. You had an inexperienced QB on the other side. You had their best player hobbled with an ankle. You had the lead by 4 with 1:26 left. You had the environment. You had it all. Like, you got to win the game. And so that's the reason that I had to draw a line, and it had to go above Notre Dame. Second team in this group, OU. OU, I saw them last week. I was impressed with a lot of things. They were kind of the next team in consideration. The defense has been really good so far this year. And that was the question coming in. Remember, this is a team that gave up over 30 points a game and over 450 yards a game last year. Not good. And so they have to improve. And while the statistics suggest that their defense is much better, like, we still have to wait and see. I still don't feel like they've played a great offense. And there were times during that game against Cincinnati when I felt like, boy, the Bearcats are a couple of mistakes away from having the lead in this game. Offensively, I like what Oklahoma does. I think that their wide receivers are their best players. I believe that their offensive line has to get better running the football. They need to find a running back that will emerge as their guy in the backfield to allow for the timing and the rhythm of the run game to really reach its potential. And then I think that their quarterback, I don't think he's got the highest ceiling in the world. I like Dylan Gabriel. He gets the ball out quickly. But when it comes to utilizing the weapons on the outside, those big wide receivers, he needs to show me that he can attack downfield with more efficiency than what he has over the last couple of years. So that's why OU fell just below the line for me. Next team up was Bama. Bama was kind of that next team under consideration for me. I've said this before now, and I said it Monday. Bama is a really good football team. They are that draft pick in the NFL draft. When you talk about them and you're like, okay, like maybe not a high ceiling, but a really high floor. High floor, low ceiling team. They're not a top-end team this year, but they're still really good. They're still probably going to win the West. They're still probably going to play for the SEC championship. So while they have a path, I just don't think they're legitimate. Because when I look at those teams that are above the line, there are several of them that it's like, you're going to have to, even if they play poorly, score minimum 28, minimum 24, maybe 30, maybe into the 30s. You're going to have to get into a game like that. If you play Washington, I think you're going to have to score 35 points minimum to win the game. Do you trust Alabama to score 35 points against anybody? Because I don't. So that's where I'm saying, like, low ceiling, high floor. Because they're going to beat almost everybody that they play. I just don't trust Bama this year with what they are at quarterback offensively to be able to go and win a game in which they've got to score 28, 30, 34 points. So that's why they were below the line. They've had an incredible era of winning, and they will continue to win. This year, it's just not going to be at the top level. Next team that I considered, and mostly just because I think other people are considering them, but someone like brought up LSU, and I'm like, LSU, man, LSU is not on the level. In fact, LSU is the fly in the ointment. Why are people not realizing that Florida State has some flaws? It's because of what they thought about LSU coming into the year. You see, we forgot about LSU and what they were a year ago. The Bama game was an anomaly. Their total wins number was a bit of an anomaly. They only beat Arkansas by 3 last year. They only beat Auburn by 4, and they were housed by Georgia A&M and Tennessee. It's like, so if you really looked at LSU and you're like, maybe they weren't quite as good. And listen, I fell into the trap. I had them up there in the top 10, and I fell into the trap. And so when Florida State beat LSU, I'm like, well, this means Florida State is really good. But does it? Maybe LSU is just the fly in the ointment. This team right now almost lost to Arkansas, got run out of the stadium against Florida State. Don't love their defensive game plan. They feel all over the place right now. LSU, I would say someone brought them up, and I was like, well, they're clearly below the line. Like, clearly. You can't play that game against Arkansas. My thoughts about LSU are why I still believe Alabama still even has a sniff or a path to the playoff. Even for how low the ceiling is for Bama, high floor, low ceiling, they're probably going to play in the SEC championship game because the SEC West is not very good. And the SEC West is not very good because LSU is not very good. And we should have at least given that some thought in the preseason. Again, guilty as charged. Hand up right here. Guilty as charged. But if you really look at what they were a year ago and now what they are this year, it's like, it's underwhelming. Underwhelming. Last team that I gave consideration was Washington State. So, like, watch out for Washington State. If there was a team that I would say, like, I reserve the right to change where the line goes later, it would be for Washington State. And the reason is Washington State is the new TCU. Cam Ward is the new Max Duggan. They're going to win a lot of tight ball games because their quarterback is really good. He's experienced. He's played a ton of football. And they have this us against the world mentality born from being left out of conference realignment. Their coach constantly talks about it. Now they've got this drama about what was said on a certain pregame show about them and their opponent and the game, and their coach addresses it after. Us against the world mentality, really good, experienced quarterback, enough talent on the outside to scare you. Granted, a tough conference, but the ability to win close games. Washington State's the new TCU. Because then it's like, well, how long will it last? That's what we were asking with TCU in particular at this point. Remember when they were escaping last year, TCU, like Kansas State, they escaped at home. Oklahoma State, they escaped at home. And you get to you're like, wow, like they're still undefeated. Could they? Will they? That's how I feel about the Cougs. That's how I feel about the Cougs. I really love Cam Ward. Now, the difference is that the Pac-12 this year is stronger than what the Big 12 was a year ago for TCU. So now you got road games against UCLA, Oregon, and Washington still to come, and you would have to play a Pac-12 title game. So while in some senses I wanted to put them above the line as this year's TCU, I can't because of that conference and because of that schedule. And in particular, because of that one team that I really love. If there are two teams that I believe in most in the Pac-12, it's Washington, number one, and then Oregon. And they have to play them both. And they have to play them both on the road. Yeah, that's tough. So This year's Cinderella, I think, is the Cougs. I think that it's Cam Ward and Washington State. I think that through the first month, if we're looking for a TCU, if we're looking for somebody to spoil it all, even though it wasn't a spoil, it was an absolute pleasure for the Horned Frogs and all of us watching last year, that would be it. If there's a guy that could come from nowhere to be a runner-up in the Heisman Trophy voting, it's Cam Ward. All of that just is reminiscent to a year ago. So that's where I finished. That's where I finished. I didn't do any of the other teams because candidly, like, I didn't consider any other teams for above the line. I did not consider. These were the only teams that I considered. If your team was not considered, that means that they're not close to above the line. Maybe that'll change. I'm not sure. You know, the teams that have the best opportunity to change my mind would be teams like Duke, North Carolina, maybe Miami, teams like that. But above the line teams heading into week 5, there are the 10 that I already said, and then the 5 that just missed out: Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Alabama, LSU, and then Washington State. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you like this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.